Go die somewhere else, Mom. This house isn't yours anymore." The door closed, the sound of the lock echoing like a gunshot. The champagne glass in my daughter-in-law's hand tilted slightly, the golden liquid glinting on the wall like a smear of blood in the fading dusk. The long hallway, washed in cold white light, reflected each family photo. Faces that once smiled at me, now standing still, silent and distant. I didn't cry, I didn't beg. I simply took the keyring off the hook and placed it on the oak table where my husband had once signed his first contract. The smell of old wood, of liquor, of betrayal, blended into a funeral scent they themselves couldn't recognize. Behind me, the champagne popped open. Foam spilled over, like the laughter of those who had just buried someone still breathing. The wind from the Charleston River slipped through the door crack, cold, salty, with a metallic taste of tears yet to fall. They thought they had ended a chapter of my life, but in truth they only miswrote it because the pen is still in my hand. Do you know something? Every story needs a betrayal to begin. And now I'll tell you how a mother turned her wound into a sentence for the ones who carved it. My name is Eleanor Parker, 68 years old. I've lived my whole life in Charleston, in the Riverside house, once filled with the scent of fresh paint and the laughter of a man named Thomas Parker, my husband, the one who turned the very first bricks into a construction empire that bore his name. I always thought I was a lucky woman. People called Thomas a genius, while I quietly stood behind him, keeping his schedule, straightening his tie, cooking dinners, where he negotiated with partners. For 42 years, I learned the art of timely silence, because sometimes silence is the background music that lets others shine. My son, Ryan, is the perfect replica of his father. Handsome, confident, intelligent, and dangerous in the way only those who have never known limits can be. He grew up under the sound of applause meant for his father, and somewhere along the way forgot the voice of the mother who taught him how to stand tall. When Thomas died suddenly of a heart attack last spring, I thought the quiet after the funeral was grief, but it wasn't. It was the quiet of calculation. That day, Ryan entered the service in a tailored black suit, his eyes sweeping across the mourners as if counting the worth of every condolence. Beside him stood Vanessa, the young wife with lips so red they looked like a warning, holding Ryan's hand while still glancing at her phone, open to a real estate app. "Mother," Ryan said before the service even ended, his voice gentle yet cold. "You can't live alone in that house forever. Let me handle it. We'll take care of everything." I looked at him and smiled faintly. "Let me handle it" used to mean love. But in the Parker family, it always meant something else. Let me take it. After the funeral, they came back, again and again, at first with flowers and kind words, then with brochures for luxury senior residences. Ryan smiled softly, placing a hand on my shoulder in what looked like comfort. "Mother, you deserve to rest." Yes, I do deserve to rest, after raising a son who now sees me as a footnote in his father's will. I didn't get angry. I didn't resist. I simply looked into his eyes and saw the reflection of the man I once loved, the gaze of someone who believed everything belonged to him. They thought I would quietly step aside, move out, and wait to be taken care of. But they forgot. The woman who helped Thomas Parker build an empire is also capable of tearing it down with her own two hands. And I made myself a promise. If they want to make me a supporting character in this story, then I'll be the supporting character no audience will ever forget. That morning, the Charleston sky was thick and gray like ash. I was making tea when I heard the sound of tires crunching on the gravel outside the gate. A familiar silver SUV stopped, reflecting the weak autumn sunlight. Ryan stepped out, suit neat, face smooth, untouched by hesitation. Vanessa followed behind, white dress, dark sunglasses, hands pulling 2 brand-new suitcases. I went to open the door, steam from the teacup still rising in my hand. "Ryan, what's going on?" "Just something necessary, Mom." His tone was calm, coldly calm. "Vanessa and I decided to move in. We sold the house in the city. As for you, you should find somewhere else, somewhere quieter." I stood still, the teacup trembling slightly in my hand. "This is my house. It's where your father and I—" Vanessa cut in, her smile sharp as a blade. "Used to be, Mother. Now it belongs to Ryan. According to the will, everything's already in his name. We're just following it." The word will drop onto the tiled floor like the clash of metal, cold and ringing. "You said will?" "Yes," Ryan replied, not blinking. "Dad knew you weren't good with paperwork. He left everything to me, so it would be easier to manage. Don't worry, Mom. I'll send you some money for your expenses." A dry smile crept across my lips. "How much are you planning to send me? Enough to rent a small room and wait to die?" Vanessa checked her watch, her voice flat. "Don't say that, Mother. There's a retirement home in Maplewood, clean, affordable, and full of people your age. I think you'll like it." I didn't answer. I just turned around and slowly walked upstairs. Each step, each creak of the wooden stairs echoed hollowly, like the heartbeat of someone whose insides had been emptied. It took me 3 hours to pack my life into 2 suitcases. 42 years of marriage, a lifetime of motherhood, a house I once called home. All now fit neatly into 2 rolling bags. When I came down, Ryan was waiting by the door, his fingers tapping lightly against his watch. "I've got a meeting at the bank, Mom. Please hurry." Vanessa took the suitcases from my hands and set them on the porch. "We'll send you the rest of your things later. Oh, and remember to turn off the gate lights. Electricity costs a lot these days." I said nothing. I didn't look at them. I just lowered my hand, brushing the stair railing, the same place I once held Ryan, steady when he was afraid of the dark. Now darkness was what he brought me. I pulled my suitcases out the door, the wheels grinding over the gravel, dry and slow. Behind me, the door shut with a clean final sound like a verdict. That night, I sat in a small motel room near the highway. The light flickered, the curtains were frayed. The smell of mildew and cigarette smoke hung thick in the air. On the table lay the will they had handed me, the signature too new, the pen strokes too straight, the notarization blurred, as if someone had tried to erase the truth. I stared at the paper for a long time. Then I smiled, not the smile of pain, but the smile of someone who had just realized something. "Thomas Parker," I whispered, "what did you hide from me?" Because I knew the man who calculated every brick of his empire would never have left me cast out from the house he built with his own hands. And in the damp darkness of that $49 motel room, I felt something flicker to life in my chest. Not fear, but a plan. The next morning I woke up early. Charleston was veiled in fog, the sunlight thin as gauze laid over an unhealed wound. I hadn't slept all night, not out of sorrow, but because one question kept echoing in my mind. If Thomas truly left a will, why had I never seen it? I folded the paper Ryan had given me, slipped it into my purse, and caught the first morning bus to the city center. Harold Vance's law office was still on the same corner, between the old red brick buildings and the familiar coffee shop. I had been there with Thomas dozens of times, but today that door felt different, heavy, as if hiding something behind it. Mr. Vance looked up when I entered. For a moment, confusion crossed his eyes, then shock. "Eleanor, my God, I thought you were at the nursing home. Ryan said you needed rest." I placed the paper on his desk. "I didn't go anywhere, Harold, and I need to know, is this the will Thomas left?" He put on his glasses and examined each line carefully. Within moments, his brows furrowed. "No, this isn't the one I drafted. There's no official seal, and this signature, it looks forged." A chill ran down my spine. "Forged? Eleanor," he said gravely, "Thomas updated his will 6 months before he passed. In the original, he left you the majority of the estate, the house, the shares, the accounts. Ryan was granted only $4 million under one condition." I gripped the edge of the desk. What condition? "If within the first year after Thomas's death, he mistreated or harmed you in any way, his entire inheritance would be revoked." I sat still. The only sound in the room was the steady tick of the clock, each beat counting down to the moment my son had unknowingly destroyed himself. Thomas, he knew. He had seen what I had been too blind to see. "Harold," I said quietly, "Ryan threw me out of the house. He said this was real. He told me to go die somewhere else." Mr. Vance's face reddened with anger. "That's fraud and inheritance theft. I can call the police right now." I shook my head. "Not yet. Don't rush. Let them believe they're still winning." He tilted his head, puzzled. "What are you planning to do?" I smiled faintly, my voice soft as a breeze brushing the rim of a teacup. "I'm going to give them more rope, enough to hang themselves. When the greedy believe they've already won, that's when they open the door to their own downfall." Sunlight streamed through the window, lighting half of my face, one side bright, the other shadowed. And I realized that after all this, I was no longer the woman cast out of her home. I was the one making the first move in the game of justice. That afternoon, Harold Vance's office turned into a small war room. On the desk lay stacks of bank records, copies of property deeds, and the power of attorney. Thomas had signed for me before he passed. Harold made several phone calls, his voice low, sharp, and precise, like the sound of metal clicking into place inside a machine that was coming back to life. "All accounts under the name of Ryan Parker and Parker Holdings are to be frozen immediately," he said to the bank. "Any withdrawal requests must require original ownership verification." I sat across from him, silently watching the numbers on the computer screen turn into a string of locked symbols. Each time the words "access denied" appeared, my heartbeat grew slower, calmer. Harold hung up the phone and turned to me. "It's done. Within a few hours, they won't be able to touch a single account." I nodded. "Good. Now we just wait for the phone to ring." And it did. About 3 hours later, my phone lit up with the name I once loved most, Ryan. I answered. His voice trembled with panic. "Mom, where are you? What happened to my accounts? The bank says everything's frozen, even my credit cards. What's going on?" I smiled, my tone so steady it startled even me. "You're asking the wrong person, Ryan. You should be asking who really owns those accounts." He fell silent for a few seconds, then spoke quickly, his voice rising. "Mom, there must be some misunderstanding. Misunderstanding?" I cut him off. "Like the way you misunderstood the will? Like how you misunderstood that you could throw your mother out and still call yourself her son?" His voice wavered. "Mom, I just wanted to manage things better for you. I didn't—" "Be quiet." My voice was soft but cold as steel. Thomas Parker once said, "Power doesn't belong to the one who holds the money, but to the one who knows when to take it back." And now, Ryan, you've just learned that lesson. I hung up before he could say another word. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. Vanessa. Without waiting for me to speak, her voice burst out, full of rage and fear. "What the hell did you do? Don't you realize this could ruin Ryan's career?" I closed my eyes, leaning back in the chair. "He ruined it himself, Vanessa. I just turned on the light so everyone could see it clearly." I heard her gasp, then the line went dead. Silence returned, only the clock ticking steadily on the wall. Harold looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Eleanor, you're calmer than I expected." I glanced out the window, Charleston bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Small boats drifting on the river as if no storm had ever passed. After losing everything, Harold, people either collapse or learn how to steer that collapse to bring others down with them. He said nothing, and for the first time in months, my heart felt still, not because of victory, but because justice had begun to move, slowly but unstoppably. That evening, Harold called again. "Good news, Eleanor. The house at 14 Oak Ridge Lane has been reinstated in your name. It's officially yours." I leaned back in my chair, staring out at the window glowing with streetlight. "No, Harold, it's always been mine. It's just that now everyone else remembers it." 2 days later, when the morning mist still blanketed the lawn, the doorbell rang. I was standing inside the very house they had once thrown me out of, the house now rightfully returned to its true owner. The freshly painted white walls still carried the scent of newness, and the wind from the Charleston River drifted through the open window, cool with the October air. On the porch stood Ryan. No more tailored suits, no more polished confidence. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and his face hollow from sleepless nights. Beside him was Vanessa, clutching her purse tightly, her eyes red, the same woman who once raised her champagne glass to toast her inheritance, now just a shadow of herself. I opened the door and stood in the doorway. I didn't invite them in. "Mom," Ryan's voice was hoarse. "I need to talk to you." "About what?" I asked, calm and even. "The bank froze everything. They said all the assets belong to you now. I know I was wrong, but you can't take everything. I'm still your son." I looked at him for a long time, as if I were looking at a stranger trying to find his place in an old photograph. "My son," I said slowly. "I didn't take anything. I only took back what should never have been stolen." Vanessa stepped forward, her voice trembling. "You can't do this. The press is writing about us. Ryan's company is losing clients. You're destroying this family." I turned to her, my gaze quiet but heavy as stone. Family doesn't throw its mother out on the street. Family doesn't forge wills and twist lies to steal from the dead. The air thickened. Ryan bowed his head, his fists clenched, his voice breaking. "I just wanted to prove to Dad that I was worthy. I didn't think it would turn out like this." "Your father knew exactly who you were," I said, my tone slicing through the mist. He left a condition in his will that if you mistreated me, your share would be revoked. You weren't robbed, Ryan. You just received the sentence your father wrote himself." Vanessa burst into tears, her sobs shattering the silence. "Can't you forgive him, please, Eleanor? You used to love him." I tilted my head slightly. Forgiveness doesn't erase what's done. Forgiveness lets others see the consequences of their own choices. I looked at Ryan. His face was now empty, wrecked, torn between shame and despair. "Ryan, I don't need you to kneel. I just need you to remember one thing. Those who have everything but forget their morals will soon have nothing left to hold." He nodded, eyes red, voice tight. "I understand." I placed my hand on the doorknob. "Good, then go. You once said this house wasn't mine anymore. Now I'm saying it back. It has no place for you." The door closed between us, not with a heavy thud, but with the soft sound of wind passing through the lavender bushes outside. The other side, I heard the car engine start, then fade into the damp hum of the morning. I stood still, my heart empty but not cold, not because of victory, but because justice had finally returned to where it belonged. On the table, my cup of tea had grown cold halfway through. I took a sip, tasting a hint of sweetness in the bitterness. In my mind, Thomas's voice echoed, faint yet unmistakable. Justice doesn't need to be summoned. It only needs someone brave enough to stand and wait. I smiled, and I had waited just long enough. A week after Ryan and Vanessa disappeared from Charleston, I thought everything was over. But then Harold came to me with a thick envelope, his face weighed down by something heavier than words. "Eleanor," he said softly, "there's something you should know. In Thomas's financial records, I found several unusual transfers. I didn't want to worry you, but I'm afraid they're not clean." I opened the envelope. Inside were bank statements, money wired to and from companies that didn't exist. Their names sounded familiar, like those that once appeared in Thomas's old contracts, but the listed addresses were faint, almost erased. The amounts were large, millions. The room seemed to drop a degree colder. "Are you saying Thomas was laundering money?" Harold hesitated, then gave a slow nod. "Most likely. I believe someone helped him hide it. Ryan and Vanessa might have discovered this and used it to blackmail you." I didn't respond. I just looked out the window, the sunset spreading across the river, its reflection gleaming like false gold. It felt as if my whole life had been painted over a polished wall, beautiful but slippery. That night, I sat alone in Thomas's study. The files were neatly arranged, every notebook, every signature, every blueprint, all carrying the breath of a man obsessively precise. But in the bottom drawer, I found something that didn't belong to him. A black external hard drive wrapped in a leather pouch. I plugged it into the computer. Hundreds of files appeared. Codename Aegis Construction Confidential. The first line in one of the notes made me stop breathing. Payments from Torino Group confirmed. Wire logs archived. Torino Group, I had heard that name on the news. A front company for an international money laundering network. I leaned back in the chair, my hands growing cold. If Harold was right, everything I had just reclaimed, the house, the company, the shares, was tainted with dirty money. "Thomas, what did you do?" I whispered. I called Harold. "If I turn all this over to the police, I'll lose everything, won't I?" "Possibly," he said. "If the funds are ruled illegal, the government will seize them. But if you stay silent, the risk is just as great. the FBI could show up at your door. I sat motionless. The house around me was so quiet, it felt like it was holding its breath with me. On the desk, the real will of Thomas still lay there. His handwriting slanted but steady, and just below his signature was a faint smudge of ink, as if he had paused for a moment, hesitating before ending the secret he left behind. I closed the file. My eyes fell on the silver-framed wedding photo. 2 people smiling by the sea, sunlight breaking on the waves. And then it hit me. I had won the first battle, but perhaps I had only just stepped onto the real battlefield. 3 days later, I decided to go to the FBI, not out of fear, but because I was tired of living among secrets. The federal building stood in the northern business district of Charleston, tall, glassy, and cold. A young female agent greeted me. Her steps were brisk, her eyes so sharp that I had to clutch my handbag tighter, as if searching for courage inside it. The nameplate on her desk read, Agent Sarah Martinez. I placed Thomas's black hard drive on the table. I believe my husband was involved with a money laundering group, and this is everything I found. She stayed silent, plugged it into her computer, and began to read. Within minutes, her expression changed, the chill in her face melting into astonishment. What did you say his name was? Thomas Parker, director of Parker Construction. Oh my God, she murmured. So you're the wife of Witness X-27. Witness what? Agent Martinez looked at me for a long moment before speaking slowly. Your husband wasn't laundering money, Mrs. Parker. He was pretending to. Thomas Parker was one of our undercover agents. He worked with the FBI for 12 years, infiltrating the Torino Group's international laundering network to gather evidence. I froze. The room spun. Only the steady ticking of the wall clock remained. But those transfers, the accounts, all monitored, she said. The government authorized every move to maintain his cover. Everything you inherited is clean, Mrs. Parker. Not a single dollar came from crime. I sank into the chair. All those years beside Thomas, I thought I knew him. Yet all that time, the man I loved had lived on the edge of life and death, and I never knew. Why didn't he tell me? My voice trembled. Because if you knew, he would have died, she answered softly. The Torino Group killed people just for hearing our name. Thomas understood that protecting you meant keeping this secret to the very end. Agent Martinez handed me a folder. Inside was a letter of commendation from the Department of Justice. Thomas Parker, 1951 to 2023, undercover witness whose intelligence led to 47 arrests and the recovery of over $200 million in criminal assets. At the bottom, in small handwritten ink, was a line. When it's over, tell Eleanor I never lied to her for myself. I read it, and tears fell, quiet, unhurried, as if, after all these years, someone in the dark had finally turned the light back on. Agent Martinez's voice softened. We'll protect you, Mrs. Parker, and if you wish, the government will help establish the Thomas Parker Foundation to continue his work. I smiled faintly. There's no need to name it after him. I'll create it, but under my own name, because justice doesn't need to stand behind anyone. A month later, I returned to the house on Oak Ridge Lane. The sky was clear, no gray clouds left. Behind the house, the lavender had bloomed again, pale purple under the morning sun. On Thomas's desk, I placed a small envelope. Inside, the letter from the Department of Justice. You hid the truth your whole life to protect me. Now I'll spend the rest of mine protecting what you believed in. I opened the window. The river breeze drifted through, carrying the scent of salt and grass. The house was silent, but not lonely, as if that man still lingered somewhere close, smiling from within, the reflected light of a picture frame. I lifted my head and drew a deep breath. No more hatred, no more fear. Only one truth remained certain. When justice arrives, it doesn't shout. It comes like dawn, slow, warm, and unstoppable. 6 months later, the house at 14 Oak Ridge Lane was no longer a place filled with hurt. On the living room wall, instead of a wedding photo, I hung a new portrait, a woman standing in the wind, her silver hair gently lifted, her eyes fixed toward the light. I was no longer Mrs. Parker, the wife of Thomas Parker. I was Eleanor Parker, a woman who had survived both love and betrayal, and now I had work to do. After the investigation, the Department of Justice advised me to keep my identity private to avoid media attention, but I refused. If I stay silent, how will others like me know they can rise again? And so, the Eleanor Foundation for Elder Justice was born. Part of the assets Thomas left were transferred into the foundation. We help the elderly who have been exploited by their children, relatives, or partners. We provide free legal aid, temporary housing, and teach them how to protect themselves under the law. On the opening day, the local television station came to interview me. A young reporter asked, "Do you have anything you'd like to say to those watching?" I looked straight into the camera. Yes, if you are a father, a mother, someone who has been abandoned or betrayed, remember this. Trust itself isn't wrong. Sometimes we just place it in the wrong hands. But justice always finds its way back. I am living proof of that. The whole went silent for a few seconds before the applause began. I bowed slightly, but inside me, the loudest applause came from Thomas. The quiet pride I could still hear in the wind that passed through the window at night. When everyone had left, I stayed alone in the empty auditorium. On the wooden stage, the lights reflected off a metal plaque, engraved with the words, "For those who were told they were useless and proved otherwise." I ran my hand over the inscription. It felt cold and beautiful. Outside, the Charleston River breeze carried the scent of lavender from the garden I had replanted by the porch. Justice never comes quickly, but when it does, it brings peace, not to end things, but to begin them. And I knew somewhere Thomas was smiling, not because he had saved me, but because I had learned how to save myself. If you've ever been betrayed, if someone has told you that you've lost your worth, that old age is nothing but a burden, remember this. They done they ru they you. They're only staring at the smallness of their own reflection in your shadow. I once believed justice meant making others pay, but in the end I learned true justice, not about who can hurt more. It's the moment you rise and they're forced to see it. I didn't take revenge. I simply told my story. Because sometimes telling it truth is truth justice, a way to make the world hear what it once chose to ignore. I lost everything, and then I gained it all back. But the most beauteous thing I found wasn't money, wasn't this house, but the peace. But comes from knowing I'll never have to bow to anyone again. Wounds will turn to scars, and scars are proof that you survived. I'm not ashamed of what happened. In fact, I'm grateful, because I discovered a strength I never knew existed. If you're listening to me now, believe this. No one is ever too old to begin again. We don't need pity, only to be heard. Because sometimes those who were pushed to the edges are the ones who rewrite the center of the story. My name is Eleanor Parker, and this isn't a story I tell to cry. It's a story I tell to remind you that even in silence, we can still make the world listen. Because every ending is only a door waiting for someone brave enough to walk through.